great experience while he was at Penn State, and went on and had a great career in the NFL, and then got back into the game. I think there's a ton of former players that would like to get back into the game. But for myself and probably a lot of coaches, you'd like for them to go do it somewhere first. Penn State's not necessarily a first job. You look at Dan Connor, he was coaching at multiple places. Alan Zamitis was coaching at multiple places. And, Jordan had been coaching for a number of years. And, I was just so impressed with him when I got to know him that it was when we had an opportunity to bring him back home and get him part of our program, because I think he's a guy that will relate very well with our players. And can be, the reality is when you play in the NFL and you're a former Penn State player, you automatically have credibility. And we had an opportunity to get him in the building, and Pat and Vinny were supportive, and we made it work. Yeah, I'm not going to get into all of that stuff, but mainly he's got a chance to be a mentor to our players. Mainly off the field, academically, socially, those types of things. Make sure they're maximizing the Penn State experience. Under the new rule changes, Pat Kraft's going to be coaching the linebackers, and Jordan's going to be coaching the D tackles, and Vinny's probably going to be coaching baseball. But you just have a lot more flexibility than you've ever had before. But ultimately, he was brought to be a mentor off the field, to our guys. So when I was with the Green Bay Packers, we did a coaching retreat, and I thought it was really good. We went to a resort in Wisconsin, Kohler, the faucets and stuff. They got a great resort. We went there, and I just sat there as a young assistant and said, this is a really good idea. I'd never been a part of this before. If I ever become a head coach, this is one of the things that I'm going to do. Mike Sherman was the head coach. So as soon as I became a head coach, we started to do it. We did it when I was at Vanderbilt, in Nashville. There's a video of myself and Brent Pry and a bunch of guys jumping off a cliff, because we always do football from 8 to 12, and then we go out and do something, golf or something in the afternoon, from a chemistry standpoint and getting to know each other. Everybody's got a different roommate, somebody that you normally wouldn't be with. So there's a lot of reasons why we do it, but it's been really valuable. And then the other thing is we work around the state. We do it in Harrisburg, Pittsburgh, different places, to get some contacts and connections there as well. But your point, we always have turnover. Obviously this year with some coordinators is important. Coaches don't want to spend time talking philosophy. They want to scheme X's and O's. But it's important everybody understands culturally who we are and why we do things a certain way. So that's what a lot of it's about structurally how we do things, why we do it that way. So now they can put that to bed and focus on football specific scheme, techniques, fundamentals. But if you don't do that, in my opinion, over 2 to 3 years, you get turnover, and then all of a sudden you got a bunch of people in the building that don't understand your culture and how you operate and how you do things.
You cited a couple of Drew's really impressive numbers at your podium session earlier today. The completion percentage dipped below 60 last year. Why do you think that is, and how can you increase the efficiency there for him second year starter?
Yeah, I think number one, you're a first-year starter in the Big Ten. I think the best defensive league in all of college football. But I think when you're year two, whether it's year two as a head coach, experience matters. Year two as a quarterback in major college football, and specifically the Big Ten, matters. So it allows him to spend the whole offseason and say, okay, these are the things I did well. I want to build on them. These are the things that I want to do better. I missed this throw. Why? Let me work on that throw all summer. I missed this check in the run game or in protections or whatever it may be. Let me kind of spend enough time on that I can clean those things up and learn from them. It's making plays for him at the running back position and the tight end position at wide receiver. And now with a new coordinator, It's how can we put him in the best position to be successful and also explosive, which was our biggest challenge last year offensively.
James, can you provide some? You mentioned overparts, the importance of getting his best out of the football. Andy said last month that Bo is one of the best out. How would you already see Bo benefit from being in Andy's team?
Well, I think, first of all, that was another area that was an issue, right? You look at the last 2 games of the year, that changed dramatically. Explosive plays changed dramatically, and touches for guys changed. So that's something that I think is football 101, but a lot of times, mistakes are made there for whatever reason. So that's a focus that me and Andy spent a lot of time talking about in the offseason. And then I think, Andy's done enough things as an offensive coordinator over 19 years that he's able to play to the strengths of his personnel. If you're looking specifically to Kansas, Bo's probably more similar to the guys that he had at Kansas. I remember talking very early with Drew about that, and I said, you're talking about a guy who's been offensive coordinator for 19 years and has done it with a lot of different people and a lot of different skill sets, and also does enough things offensively that we're going to be able to play to whoever the strengths are of the guys that are on the field. So he'll have a role. He needs to have a role. He had a role last year. He's still competing for the job as well. But he's going to need to be a part of what we do either way, however this camp plays out.
James, could you provide some clarity on DeAndre Lambert-Smith's decision to enter the portal?
I'm more than happy to talk about the guys in our current program. You want to talk about the guys in our current program?
I'm happy to.
Yeah, I'm just saying, who you got?
Are you concerned at all about the depth in your wide receiver room, or do you feel good?
No, we love the guys in our wide receiver room, excited about what they're going to do. Obviously, we added Julian Fleming from the transfer portal, who's a Pennsylvania guy and doing great. I want to talk about our program, our guys. I got nothing but respect and love for the guys that have been of our program in the past, but that's not what the Big Ten Media Days is for, is to talk about other programs and other players, in my opinion. Yeah, I don't think so. Obviously, a lot of people have kind of made that statement and talked about that statistic or that data, and that's great. For us, it's what do we do to put Penn State this year in the best position to make the playoffs, but then not just make the playoffs, put ourselves in an advantageous position in the playoffs. How do we put ourselves in a position to have an opening week bye? It's amazing. I've seen so many things about Notre Dame not having a bye as part of their requirements with the playoff. They do have a bye. They don't have a conference championship game. That's their bye. How do we get ourselves in a position to have a bye? If not a bye, how do we put ourselves in the best position to have a home game in Beaver Stadium, which would be an advantageous position with those elements at that time of the year. So that's our focus. How do we get into the playoffs? And then not only that, how do we put ourselves in the most advantageous position so we can make a run, and a run that could be up to 17 games. I think one of the interesting things that is a challenge with the college football playoff model is, in some ways, if you play in the Big Ten championship game and you lose the Big Ten championship game, that is a more challenging situation than not playing in the playoffs, not playing in the championship game and making the playoffs. And I don't know if that is ideal, but the reality is the conferences are making too much money from the conference championship game, and they're not going to give them up. But that's one of the things that's a little bit of a challenge and a curveball for the way the system is currently set up.
James, you mentioned the potential for a home playoff game. I know this is very sort of out there, but what's the possibility that you could pull a sort of spur of the moment whiteout for a visiting team in a home playoff game?
It may be a whiteout, and we had nothing to do with it being a whiteout. It may be a weather whiteout. I will say this. something that me and Pat really haven't talked about up to this point, but we feel very strongly that there should be one whiteout a year. We're able to create some really cool environments with a stripe out, a helmet stripe, which is very close to a whiteout. We're able to create some really good environments. The throwback game, I think it's up for discussion with myself, Pat, and others to say, hey, we only do one whiteout a year, but if we would have a home playoff game, is that something to discuss? That, this is a different model in college football, and we want to do everything we possibly can to put us in the best position to be successful. And if that gives us a little bit extra juice, and between Pat Kraft and Mother Nature, we may have one of the biggest whiteouts we've ever had.
What have you seen from him? And you said he's in a good place, but just what do you see him? How do you see him attack, but also what do you see him competing?
Yeah, he's competing for a starting job right now. He is happy and healthy. I got a very strong relationship with both his mom and dad. Both are Penn State alums. Both are former athletes at Penn State, and it's been very clear to me that Nolan is thriving right now. When you talk to our strength coaches, he's thriving. When you talk to his parents, he's thriving. And I thought he did enough this spring to give himself a ton of confidence and also give us a ton of confidence as coaching staff that he's got a chance to play for us and play at a high level, allow us to win games in the Big Ten.
What impact do you think helmet radios and tablets on the sideline are going to have over the course of the game? And how comfortable, what have you done to try and get comfortable, and how comfortable are you?
Yeah, I don't think it's as significant as people think. I think the whole reason that this got changed is the whole sign stealing deal. I think that was a big reason why this rule got changed, and it doesn't really help that. I think a lot of people that passed the rule think it did. If you're running a no-huddle offense and you could talk to the quarterback, how do you get the information to the wideouts that are 53 yards apart from each other? You're still going to have to signal. So there may be more people that huddle than have in the past to avoid people stealing signs, but it doesn't really resolve that. For us, either way, we're happy with it. There are some challenges that you have on special teams because you can only have one guy on the field at once with it. And on special teams, you got a blend of people on the field. And you could have some changes throughout the game where you end up with two players on the field at the same time. So you got to be strategic about that. You got to be careful. But I think it's a good rule change. I'm glad it happened. But I think the whole reason the rule got changed is because of the sign stealing whole discussion, and I don't really feel like that resolves that whatsoever. No, I think that's a really good question. I do think that you have to be careful with too many cooks in the kitchen. I think the NFL is a really good example of that. Typically in the NFL, you got the head coach is the quarterback's coach, the offense coordinator is the quarterback's coach, and the quarterback coach is the quarterback coach. And in some ways in the NFL, he's almost like a GA, for the quarterback position. So I do think you have to be strategic about it. You got to be smart. We talked about this the last few days about make sure everybody in the room understands we're going to maximize our personnel, but don't just think because the rule changes that you're coaching, because you have to prove that you're ready for that. But Pat will coach the linebackers that don't play. We'll let Pat coach those guys. Dan Connor and Tom Allen will coach the ones that do. But honestly, we're going to maximize it as much as we possibly can. And the rules allow you to have some flexibility. They really do. So we're going to look at that. But I think your point is a good one. We want to make sure that we're taking advantage of the horsepower that we have and the manpower that we have, but make sure that we don't have too many voices in too many rooms. And when there are different voices, ultimately we better all be speaking the same language and singing the same song and singing it the same tune. Yeah, I already answered that, but I'll answer it again. So if you're running a no huddle offense, and you're talking to the quarterback, how do the receivers that are 53 yards apart from each other get that information? So whether you're signaling from the sideline to get that call in, or whether you're talking to the quarterback's still got to get that information out to the receivers. So you got to choose to either not go no huddle, or now have the quarterback get the information, but if you want to go fast, you still got to have to signal to the receivers from the coaches, or now the quarterback signaling. But I think it's like anything else. It's the old, whisper down the line, that whole thing in class where you teach the class and you say something to you and you whisper. By the time it gets over here, it's a totally whisper down the alley. It's a totally different story by the time it gets to the end. So I think as coaches, you're always trying to eliminate as many steps in the process as possible to eliminate mistakes or miscommunication.
James, do you have any updates on Drew Sheldon?
What hat is that?
This is a Bucky's.
That's the Bucky's, the convenience
I'll get you
store.
one when they come out.
But I was going to say, the Wawa and Sheets people are going to be pissed.
Especially Joe Herman's a big Wawa.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, that feels almost like,
I'll hear about it now.
yeah, you should. That's why I'm bringing it up.
Drew was limited in spring.
Everybody get a picture of him and put it out on all the Penn State outlets, Pennsylvania outlets.
Drew was limited a little bit.
You're like, can I ask my question?
Yeah, just try it.
Just trying to ask a question.
Drew was limited in spring. He could play a big role for you. Do you have an update on him? And
I'm
also
talking about Shelton.
Drew Shelton.
Yeah.
And also Jackson Smolik. You said he had a significant
Yep.
injury. Where is he at in the battle, maybe for number 3 as far as health?
Yeah, Drew is full go. He got cleared, maybe about halfway through the summer for everything. Certain lifts was being, modified on. He's able to do all the contact and everything now. So he's full go and has been full go long enough that we feel good about it. Smolik's going to be a little bit longer in this process until he's full go. So make it difficult for him during training camp to be competing for a job. But he's done a really good job mentally. He's very far along in the process. I'm not sure if you're aware of this or not. This is the second time he's done that. So I think sometimes that's helpful, is when these guys have had significant injuries, and that's kind of what I mean in terms of injuries. He's had significant injuries before. The guys that are going through it the first time, they struggle because they've never been through it before. He's been through a significant injury before, and I think it's really helped him in his approach and his maturity about how to handle it.
James, what kind of opportunity in that vein is available for Runkemeyer entering preseason camp? Jackson's not going to be available for full go initially.
Yeah, so Grunk will be a part of that, competition, and obviously when one guy's not cleared yet to practice fully, he's going to get a lot more reps and a lot more opportunity, where probably leading up to this, Bo and Drew are in a competition, and probably Smolik and Grunk were in a competition. I mean, they're all ultimately competing for the starting job, but just based on experience and what they've done, that's probably how it would have played out. And Grunk and Smolik would have split those reps with Group 3, where now, at least during training camp, Grunk will get most of those.
Coach, how do you feel today about the hybrid role, so to speak? You're moving after defensive end linebacker. We obviously can't start most every game. So how do you feel about your depth at defensive end and at linebacker when he has moved to one of the other spots?
Yeah, I think a couple things. I think we feel good about it at defensive end, obviously with Abdul, moving there. But after he got done spring ball, we sat down and had a conversation with him and his dad, and they're comfortable with, moving back and forth. And the good thing is, I think that also helps us from a game planning perspective, that people can't just say, we know Abdul's going to be at this spot all game long. So I think that's helpful. The other thing is, all the way back to my time at Vanderbilt, we were essentially a 4-2-5 defense. And you have the ability to do those things to maybe solve some depth issues you may have, or just philosophically, you want to put a different type of athlete and body type at that position. Also, as you know, we feel really good about three safeties that we have and the amount of football they've played for us. So that creates other ways to get those guys on the field. So now rather than feeling like you got to provide depth at 3 linebackers, you really got to provide depth at 2 linebackers, knowing that you can split that depth of the 3rd linebacker with a safety, with a corner if you want to play true nickel, a big nickel like a safety like we just talked about, or like we've done for a number of years with a true linebacker. We're one of the few teams left in college football. We're still playing with 3 linebackers. The funny thing is with Brent Pry coming from Vanderbilt, we never played 3 linebackers. We were 2 linebackers and what we called a star back then. But coming to Penn State and it's LBU, I think it's hard not to have 3 of those true linebackers on the field, and we embrace that.
One of those safeties is Jalen. Obviously, he's going into his 3rd season, losing some leaders on the defense from last season. What did you see from him over this offseason, both as a safety and in that role?
Yeah, he's just been great. He's played a ton of football for us. He kind of understands how we operate. He understands Penn State and the community. Done really well academically. Him and Coach Poindexter got a tremendous relationship. He's not the most verbal guy on a normal day-to-day basis. He's done a great job here today. Super articulate, fun, showing a lot of personality. On a day-to-day basis, he's pretty quiet, but he's also one of these guys when he gets on the football field. He's got a great football IQ, and he's willing to speak up and be verbal. And we're going to need that from him this year, and he showed it all spring and all summer as well.
You mentioned Abdul seemed to play a lot as well. I guess where do you kind of stand with the depth there? And is Zariah for sure out for the season?
No, I don't think I ever said that. You have a tendency to do that. Like you take something I say, I'm just saying you take things I say and then you say it back to me in a different way to try to get me to slip up and answer the question. But I think what I said was these guys I report it when they have long-term injuries, I think is how it's been reported. We expect to have Zariah, Jackson, these guys that you guys asked about back at some point this season.
What about the defensive?
Again, with I think what was mentioned, like when Abdul moved there, it made us feel good about it.
Coach, how do you kind of justify, with the new guys coming in, these freshman jerseys, how do you kind of justify the reps to say, okay, this guy can help us, and this guy is next. So what are you looking for in terms of
Yeah, I think for us it's interesting because that's a question we get a lot from recruits and their families. It's pretty simple. If you can help us beat West Virginia, you'll be on the field and you'll play. If you can't, you won't. You'll be on the bench. A lot of schools tell them what they want to hear. You're going to play as a true freshman. You have no idea. Guys get drafted in the first round, they've done a ton of research on, and they end up being busts, right? So the recruiting process is one thing, and then you got to show up on campus and you're starting all over again. You got to earn it again, and you'll get what you earn. Some guys are physically ready to play, but they're not emotionally ready to play. Some guys are physically ready to play, and they're emotionally ready to play, but they can't learn the playbook. They're not mentally ready to play. The playbook's very different from high school. So you got to be physically ready. You got to be mentally ready. You got to be emotionally ready to play.
James, I think you mentioned all the other guys who are dealing with injuries in a public forum, but Keon Wiley's the one that didn't. Is he somebody that you expect to be back this season as well?
Yeah, expect him to be back. Same thing, long-term injury, but we expect him to be back this season, and excited about getting him back. So, some of the discussions we have too is like, we're limited in who we can invite to camp. So, who do we invite to camp, and not based on those types of things. If you're getting a guy back, by the 3rd game of the season, and you probably make sense bringing him to camp. If you're having a guy that maybe is not going to be ready till the 6th or 7th game of the season, maybe you wait and hold from bringing him to camp or bring somebody else in. Those are all the things that we're trying to decide. The challenges we all know is everybody heals different. Like some guys heal ahead of schedule, some guys heal slower than schedule, and you don't know that. Some guys really attack rehab, and some guys struggle with that at first. That's like I talk about guys that have been through major injuries before. It kind of helps because they realize they can get through this and it's not the end of the world. So that's hard to predict. That's hard to predict. But they are injuries that have been described as long-term, but we do expect to have back at some point this year. And again, when you're talking about a possible 17-game season, that could factor in for us. I think the other thing you guys recognize as well, there's the physical aspect of an injury, but there's also the mental aspect of the injury that they got to get through that as well and play as fast and as aggressive as they did beforehand. And that takes some time too.
James, does the addition, do you think, of the 4 West Coast teams in the conference, does that change anything for you guys recruiting-wise?
That's a polo shirt, isn't it?
It is.
It's a lot going on, so I was trying to find the polo in there. Yeah, it's very nice.
Exactly. Can that...
What was your question again? You start from the beginning.
I lost it.
Yeah, so did I.
Can the 4 West Coast teams in the conference...
Your buddies think it's hilarious.
Oh, outfit was a big talking point.
Okay.
But can those 4 West Coast teams, can that change a recruiting operation for you guys? Can that open more doors in Los Angeles and in the Pacific Northwest than 2 years ago, 5 years ago? Can that change things for you?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, we've had some West Coast kids on the team already, but I do think it opens it up when you sit here and say to yourself, if you're a kid on the West Coast, that we're going to have a number of games in our backyard. I think that's helpful. I mean, obviously, families have shown over years of college football that they'll travel and find a way to make it work, but I think this helps. We have a little bit maybe of a challenge that others don't. I don't know if you guys have been to State College, Pennsylvania before. It's not the easiest place to get into. It's not the easiest place to get out of. We've spent a ton of time and homework on this because, even when we play USC and we go out there this year, we got to drive an hour and 45 minutes to get to the airport in Harrisburg to get out there. We can't get a plane out of State College that will make it all the way to LA. So all these things factor in, and as a Northeast school, that creates some challenges. I think Rutgers has similar challenges, but I think they got bigger airport options that we don't have. So that impacts games and travel, that impacts recruiting, that impacts a lot of things, and we got to be strategic about how we approach those things.
There have been a ton of historic recruiting battles between Penn State and Oregon going back many years, although you guys have had a couple skirmishes, I'd say, Tyseer being one of them. What has it been like recruiting against them since, particularly the last year, since the news of Oregon joining?
Yeah, that's a whole another conversation. But a good question and a fair one. It's been good. They've done a great job. Their staff has done a great job. We all know what they've been able to do facility-wise. Obviously, the success that they've been able to have in that conference as well. They've really become a national brand in a short period of time for a lot of reasons, and a big part of that obviously is the Nike logo and Phil Knight, who I know very well and got a ton of respect for. So, they're a battle. We're in a situation where almost every guy that we recruit, it's like those type of programs. It's interesting whenever we hire a coach. I think a lot of times you hire a coach who maybe hasn't been at this level of program. They think, well, I'm just going to come to Penn State and I got the logo on my shirt and it's going to be easy. It's not going to be easy. You're just recruiting against different people now. There's a different level of program you're recruiting against, and that creates challenges. And Oregon is definitely one of those for a number of reasons that make them difficult to recruit against.
James, is that indeed the plan? You guys will go to Harrisburg on Friday and fly out here. So is that what you guys have settled on? Or is it still...
We're going out to Harrisburg, yes.
So what date to be determined?
To be announced.
So maybe Thursday?
Maybe Tuesday.
Yeah, I'm all for extended stay.
Maybe so. So because if we go, you get to go? Okay. We will, but it doesn't make it an open practice.
No, I'm throwing it out there. If you'd
Oh.
like to do it, then we'd have to go.
Thank you. No, but we will go out early, and we will go to Harrisburg. These are all the things, talking to all the different NFL organizations as well as college teams that have traveled before. I think that's also the value of having somebody like Pat Kraft, because these are things I don't know if people think about. Most schools have policies that tell you when you're able to travel for away games. So now when you add, the West Coast teams that we've added, those things now are open for discussion. Like it's not the same old Big Ten. It's not the same old policies we have in place. Everything needs to be looked at so that we can put our programs, let's just like they're probably having to do the same thing to create a little bit more flexibility. I think it helps with football because we really only have 5 travel games where some of these sports, they're traveling all year long, whether it's baseball or basketball. They got a ton of days of school they possibly miss. Football, it's 5. So that creates a little bit of flexibility and helps. But yeah, we will travel out from Harrisburg. That is correct.
James, is Downey still a GA, and at what point do you have to find a different title for him, I guess would be the right word?
Yeah, I don't think if we have to. The only thing that would force us to change his title is you got a timeline. I think it's 3 years to be a GA, and then there's also for starting a GA, I think it's a 7-year after you graduate or stop playing in the NFL or professional football in general. They're really the only things that mandate or affect that. And now with the new rules, I mean, literally, you can do whatever you want and be strategic about what's going to be best, not only for coaching and but also recruiting, because that's the only thing that you have a limitation on now is the 10 coaches that are able to go out on the road recruiting. So you could see some coaches, which I'm not going to get into that right now, but you could see some coaches being moved to analysts and some analysts becoming your 10th full-time coach so they can go out on the road recruit.
Josiah coming off an injury to end his high school career. How do you feel about what he's been able to accomplish thus far?
Yeah, as you guys know, I think we'll have another opportunity, another local opportunity once we get into camp. It's probably better for me to speak at that point. All the information I have now is just based on what the quarterbacks have said and what the strength staff has said and the little that I've been able to see. But it's hard at this point. I do know Peter came in and tested really well. He's one of our bigger wide receivers. He jumped really well. He ran really well. He's like 205 pounds right now. He's a big physical athlete. And then I would say with Tyseer, there's just been a real buzz about his demeanor and his approach and how competitive and how confident he is. There's a buzz in the program about him when you talk to guys, but you'll get to see a little bit of that when you guys come out to practice, and I'll be able to talk more informed once I've seen it. I just haven't seen enough of it to speak intelligently about it with you guys.
Can I just follow up on Josiah, though?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I will say this, that it kind of goes back to my comment before. He's been physically cleared for a while, but this is his first major injury, so there's the mental aspect. And I know talking to him in the weight room the other day, he's finally at a point where he feels like, I ask guys all the time, like, what percentage would you say you are? And it's like 73%. Like, where the hell did you get, how do you come up with 73%? Like 70%, 80%, 85, 90, whatever. And the other day for the first time, he said, Coach, I'm 100%. I'm like 100%? He goes, yeah, 100%. Like, he feels good. So that's great going into camp. Real talented guy. It's a shame that his senior year got cut short. Really, at the game I was at, it happened. So it's exciting having him back and seeing what he'll do, and it's great that he feels mentally and physically 100% going into camp. So that's 3 young guys that we're pretty excited about. Yeah, 14 years now as a head coach, 3 in the SEC now and 11 in the Big Ten and specifically at Penn State. It is a very, very different job than it was when I first started. Very, very different. But I think at the end of the day, whether it's the players and NIL or transfer portal and all these things, or whether it's the coaches and same thing, NIL, transfer portal, as well as coaches, losing Brent Pry, going to be the head coach of Virginia Tech, losing Manny Diaz, going to be the head coach of Duke, all these different things. I think it's really important for all of us to remember your why and why you got in it in the same place. There's certain times a year, certain periods that aren't a whole lot of fun and aren't necessarily what I signed up for. But at the end of the day, when I run out on that grass with these guys and I watch them graduate and I watch their parents drop them off for their first day, you know, after signing with us out of high school, and you look at the smiles and you look how proud they are, and you watch them and you're flying around and having fun and coaching the game and smelling the fresh cut grass, that's why I do it. And whether it was at East Stroudsburg in front of 3,000 or Penn State in front of 107,000, and now in the Big Ten and going to be in the Coliseum, it's still the game of football, and it's still special, and I still appreciate it.
What are your initial plans for the roster limits are increased to 105? It sounds like it's only going to be scholarship. What does that do in recruiting plans to get to that point a year from now, and how you're going to go about getting there, and if you're going to fill that all with scholarships?
Yeah, I don't think it's all going to be scholarships. I think that's up to every school to decide how they want to handle that. You have the ability to do that, obviously. They cannot limit scholarships anymore. That's why they're limiting the roster size. And everybody will have a different way of doing that, especially when you're talking about, all the things that are coming in college football. You have the ability to keep your number small so that you're able to impact the guys that are on scholarship as significantly as possible, or you can spread the wealth. It's going to be more challenging for some programs than others. We've got programs in our conference that got 145 players on the team. So this is going to be a huge change for some programs culturally. I do think there is some flexibility in how you practice. In terms of your roster size, I think the 105 starts your first game, but during spring ball and summer camp, your numbers could be bigger than that. Say it again.
The new recruiting calendar that changes some of the dates and things like that, that's very simple.
Yeah, I think in general, I think most of them have been a good thing. I really do. I think their intentions were good. I think one of the problems you've heard people talking about a while, we got to stop kind of piecemealing it and do one big change because you make these changes and they have unintended consequences. You're going to have this signing class that's going to happen, and we're never going to home visit them. There's some gaps in this process with some of the changes and how things happen. But I think in general, the idea of having a dead period at a time of year where most people are trying to get a little bit of off time with your family is positive. In the old days, you'd be on vacation, the number one defense tackle in the country calls and say, I'm going to be on campus tomorrow, can you be there? You're flying back. So I do think there's some value in the intentions of what we're trying to do, but we need to do it more holistically rather than piecemealing it.
Harbaugh about 10 years ago with the satellite camp discussion and how that's become like a cottage industry and the June recruiting calendar to when you first got there and you and Brett and the SEC were saying like, yeah, this has happened a little bit in Texas, but we really need to do this. It wasn't legal. And then you get to Penn State, you go down to Georgia and Florida, and it causes a holy war down there. How much credit do you personally feel like you deserve for some massive change to like the recruiting ecosystem of college football? I don't think your name necessarily gets the appropriate. Good,
leave it out of it. Yeah, leave it out of it. I don't know. I don't worry about that. I guess for me, I want to make sure that Penn State, whenever the rules change, we need to be as bold and aggressive as we possibly can under the new current rules. And that's really any industry. In any industry, when the rules change, you better change with the rules, and you better change quickly or you're going to be left behind. And that's what we're trying to do. And I think that is challenging at some places across the country that take so much pride in the history and traditions and how things have always been done. At places that have really tried to do it the right way, some of these rule changes can be even more challenging. But that's really us. I'm just trying to make sure that anywhere where we can find an advantage, we want to try to maximize that advantage. We want to be bold, aggressive in the decisions we make.
Last one. I know you don't have Indiana on the schedule, but when you were an assistant at Maryland, Kurt Cignetti was an assistant at NC State. You guys were both recruiting coordinators at the time as well. How much familiarity did you have with them at all and during that rivalry?
Yeah, I don't know it based on how you described it. My history is his dad was a legendary coach at IUP, and his dad offered me my first full-time position as the offensive coordinator at IUP. I got offered the receiver's job at Maryland and took that instead. But I had a ton of respect for his dad. IUP recruited me out of high school. His dad offered me my first full-time job. Well, that's not necessarily true. But basically offered me my first coordinator position. And then I ended up having an opportunity to kind of go from there. But I knew of his dad and knew of his sons kind of through that more so than what you described about his time at NC State and my time at Maryland. That's how I know the Cignetti family and got a ton of respect for his dad and what the family's been able to do in terms of impacting the game of football.
Thank you, Coach.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.